start with a brief intro before I hand over to our wonderful panelists to introduce themselves tonight. My name's Yolanda. I think I see some familiar Zoom names on here, but I'm the founder of Uncommon. Uncommon is a peer learning network for women in leadership. We're based out of Singapore, but work with members across the wider APAC region. We've got Michele here tonight, who's one of our coaches, and really excited tonight. Obviously, this is a subject that's super close to my heart, and really think we have a fantastic panel here tonight who will go ahead and introduce themselves. Ivna, do you want to go first?
Sure, yes. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Ivna Curi. I'm here in California right now, and what I do is I help professionals. I focus a lot on women in male-dominated environments, and I've been doing a lot of work with women in tech on speaking up skills and assertive communication, which includes self-advocacy, advocating for others, advocating for the ideas that you have. And yes, and I actually have a podcast where I interview a lot of these women called Speak Your Mind Unapologetically. And I've also recently published a book with the stories of these women who are mostly women in tech, 101 stories of them speaking up in order to get what they want for themselves, for their career, but also for advocating for their ideas. So thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you, Ivna. Thanks. Michele, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Michele Lum, and I am a professional certified coach. So just by way of introduction, I guess, I have about 22 plus years of corporate experience, and I began coaching leaders at my workplace back in 2018, right? So that was after I experienced my own personal transformation as a result of coaching conversations. The experience I had was so powerful that I decided to pursue coaching as a life calling, and just to be able to have many conversations with professionals and individuals alike. I'm also a coach with Uncommon as well. And these days, that's what I enjoy most, being with my clients, being with women like yourselves, having a conversation. Could be casual, but it could be also very meaningful. Whatever it is that, whatever it is that's important for women and men alike, of course, to come to a place of fulfillment in their lives. So oftentimes I find myself working with professional leaders and individuals in areas of leadership and health and well-being. So in these areas, we're really moving towards my clients designing the lives that they want to lead. So being happier and being fulfilled in the lives that they want. So I'll just pass it back to Yolanda at this time.
Thank you, Michele. And I've definitely witnessed, the impact you've had with many women leaders over the years. And last but not least, Gail, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Gail. I'm a mom of two, Singapore-based, Singapore-born, but also very un-Singaporean in some ways. I will say I'm a recovering people pleaser, a recovering type A perfectionist, and a recovering ex-banker. And I work with a lot of, I've also been a coach for 14 years after I left banking. And I work with a lot of folks who are feeling like life is coming at them real quick. They're usually in their 30s. They usually have had some level of success by conventional standards, and they are high performers for the most part. But they're also asking the questions like, what is my life about? Where is it going to lead? And it's a time where they're pondering big moves like promotions, relocations, starting families, caregiving, and all that adulting gets real. And so I've been through that myself, but I like to say always earlier than others. I've done that in my 20s when I left banking. Um, and I help people get clarity because we all have our own truths. And I help them live by their truth. That's the name of my practice, where we define success. What kind of leader will you be? How do you want to show up? And what's going to really count in one's life? And I continue to be a student on that path. I'm always learning about myself, about what's true, and how do I honor that.
Wonderful. What an inspiring journey. Thank you so much, Gail, for sharing that. Okay, I see we have some more people trickling in, and happy to see that. We're going to cover a range of subjects today, which I think is really exciting, because I think that succeeding as a leader in general, but as a woman leader, it does require really a range of skill sets, of tools, and we're going to start with the self. I think that anyone who has been a leader definitely, I think, has struggled with self-doubt, but I think it's particularly can be challenging for women because we don't always have a lot of role models. I know that's something I experience as a leader in tech, is that, okay, you're the only female director or you're the only female country manager, and you have this sense of loneliness is real. And I'd love to turn it over to each of our speakers, to share a little bit about this. Michele, maybe I'll start with you. I'd love to know, how do you navigate moments of self-doubt, and what strategies have you found effective in overcoming imposter syndrome?
Well, for me, I actually didn't know I was moving in that journey, yeah, I guess there's always been self-doubt, but for me personally, what was more pronounced, I recall the last few years when I was in the corporate world. It was back in 2014, 2015. I had a medical condition. It's hip osteoarthritis, and I found myself limping back then. And that being in that state, I found myself, I began to feel like a cripple. And what it is that self-limiting belief that I was handicapped because I was limping. And with that mindset, I, just tried to speak louder, be seen more, fight harder, constantly working myself, doing above and beyond, and also pushing the teams that way. So I guess it's always a sense of, yeah, I'm not good enough. I'm not complete. Um, and, for me, just going through that, I actually honestly didn't know back then what I could do because, there didn't seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel. And that was when I enrolled in a coaching certification program. That was when it all started to surface. It was through a coaching conversation where I realized that, firstly, I'm not handicapped. So that whole mindset, that whole belief that I had, that I held so strongly to, was actually not truth. It wasn't true because when in conversation, I discovered I'm not crippled because I can still move and I can still dance. May not dance as well as I used to, but I can certainly still move. I don't qualify for that handicap parking ticket, that sticker that we put in the car. I don't qualify. And so, just reframing, thinking about it, slowing down to think about the fact that, is there even any truth to some of these assessments that I'm making in my life? And, to cut the long story short, conversation slowing down actually helped me reflect on my situation. And it made me realize I'm not a handicap. I do have a medical condition that I can manage. And with that mindset shift, it actually opened up opportunities for me to take proactive measures to eat healthier, lose a whole bunch of weight, reduce the inflammation, learn to walk again without a limp through physiotherapy. So that was my journey walking it out. So yeah, it was from that place of being crippled or having self-doubt to a place of empowerment and taking proactive measures. Yeah.
What I love about your story, thank you so much, Michele, is yeah, that you really highlight the power of actually one's own ability to shift the same situation, but just look at it from different perspectives, and I guess in a way like deconstruct some of the some of the biases that we hold within ourselves, some of the judgments that we hold. We can actually in many ways, you know, take those from the environment, but also decide, okay, this isn't something that I want to hold true for myself. So I really love that. I'll turn it over to Gail. Gail, I'd love to hear from you. You know, I know that you've coached a lot of women, and it sounds, you know, these very high achieving types. Would love to know in what ways so looking more at the kind of structures and environments that we're in what ways can organizations foster environments that mitigate self-doubt among women leaders in tech?
Well, as someone who's battled with self-doubt my whole life, right, and I think in the last 2 years turned a corner around how I think of myself. I think at the core of it, the best defense to self-doubt is the good offense, which is radical self-love and acceptance. And that is certainly an individual's work. And I work on that every day. I have my practices and rituals. And of course, choosing the environments we work in. I had a conversation with a client yesterday, and she's moved from a very toxic environment to this affirming one. And she was just, she had a huge culture shock, a good one, but you know, directionally. But I think we may not realize the extent of the toxicity that we might be in sometimes. So I think a really great organizational approach is celebration and safety. There's a lot of data around safety and psychological safety for teams and how that just brings out our best. And safety is also, how do you disagree safely? How do you admit mistakes safely? That's just a really healthy cultural, generally, not just a gender. It's not a gender thing, right? But I think celebration is perhaps something we, you know, I mean, I got high achieving because I beat myself up a lot, right? You always want to go further. And how much more pain can you take sometimes to distinguish yourself? And so our internal dialogue is one, but our environment also calls us, you know, every week at a meeting to say, what are you proud of yourself for doing? I think we don't do that enough in organizational settings. Whether you're running a small team or you work in a large organization, the ones that really get you fired up on a Monday morning or Friday evening when you close the week are those of celebration. So that's yeah, to mitigate all the way that we're wired, right?
Yeah,
The human beings are wired.
I love that, and I love that idea of celebrating, and I think it's so overlooked. And I think one thing that, especially in startups, like you're moving so quickly, you're always looking ahead to what's the next step, what's the next milestone. And it can be so easy, definitely something I've experienced, like to forget, like, oh my gosh, yesterday I realized it was Uncommon's 3-year anniversary. And it was only because I was like moving something on my calendar, and I was like, March 27th. That was like our first onboarding day, and it's yeah, it can be so easy to like constantly be looking ahead, close the quarter, do this, and that I think that's really great advice. I also really love what you said on choice, like that sometimes, and that comes back to that piece on agency is, sometimes we can feel like we're letting someone down. We don't know who, all other women, or giving up is, and stepping away from a situation is somehow letting yourself down, letting others down. And I like that idea of like, you can actually take back that power in some ways by saying, okay, this is not right for me. So thank you. I'm gonna move us along a little bit because we've got a lot of other topics to cover. And this one, Gail, I'm going to go back to you on this because we've got a lot of founders on this call, talking about fundraising. I think the latest stat I checked for like venture funding for women founders in Southeast Asia is 0.6% of the pool. And so, raising funds for businesses is never easy, and it can feel extremely challenging, and sometimes traumatic for women founders. Would love to hear from you a little bit about your experience and what are some key tactics to be effective in fundraising without it kind of having an impact on your mental health, your self-worth.
Yeah. And I'll just to frame it, in addition to coaching, I've continued my finance work as an investor in inclusive businesses and with a gender lens. So a lot of female founders in my portfolio, and I'm surrounded by them in my work as clients and in portfolio companies. And I wrote a piece on fundraising trauma on my LinkedIn if anyone wants to really dive in there. I don't even bother to check the stats nowadays because like it is that depressing. And there is a lot of work, tactical prep to go behind, embarking on a fundraising journey. Right. I won't detail that, but along with what any founder needs to know, I think understanding the bias or there's a great piece from I want to say Pitch Book a few years ago that talked about this funding gap and the biases. And there's a lot of tactical things from there that one can incorporate into your pitching conversations as you go about. But absolutely, the mental and human piece of fundraising is rarely addressed. And it can be really just a chronic depletion. Going out there, pounding the street and getting no's, getting your judgment questioned, being dismissed, underestimated. There's knowing or expecting that this would happen, and then there's actually going through that, right? And I think there's a lot of mental hygiene practices that we need to be proactive about if anyone was undertaking fundraising. First of all, knowing that your success, how you define success for yourself, tying that to fundraising goals is a pretty tricky, slippery slope. And I think the whole world will make you think that that's success. The headlines that you see, so when such company raised X million, and here you are like trying to fill your fundraising sheet. The whole world will make you feel like that's a measure of success. But I think being very clear on what is success will be the ultimate preventive measure. When it gets to a point of people saying don't take things too personally, I mean that's a little too late, right? So be really clear that your fundraising outcomes are not necessarily tied. The other thing is power, because we go into these conversations being aware at a visceral level that the investor has the power to say yes or no and to tell you how much. And the ones who have successfully fundraised without a debilitating mental health state are those who have cultivated their personal power. And it might even go to the point of saying, dealing, and it translates in how they deal with investors, and the timelines that they set, and really getting your potential investors to be on your side. I mean, you want us to win, right? Get us the money in time. I saw this a lot last year with the funding winter, and it's there is a lot of work that goes behind building an abundance mindset that can change the way we interact with investors and the outcomes.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And I do have a follow-up, maybe a little more specific on this. Like, I know that you work with a lot of women. Do you think that what you observe, that there's something specific or that it's harder to cultivate that abundance mindset because for women founders?
Goes with the self-doubt, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so the research shows that women under ask, they raise less than the male counterparts. They ask for less, they get lower valuations, and they get asked all the risk defensive questions. And yeah, no wonder that, we feel like crap, right? After an investor meeting, if that really is happening. So your question was?
It was mostly like, do you think that there is this different approach, or as a result of those biases that women are up against, and those doubts and everything that you're kind of constantly trying to like avoid or face? Do you see that there is maybe a different toolkit that's needed, or a challenge around sort of the abundance mindset that you mentioned?
Yeah, so one of my abundance practices is I've been keeping logs of like the moments where I'm in flow in life. Like, I'm meant to do this. Like, it's just a huge big yes. So whatever those yes moments are for you, I think it can help to remember them, whether it's pictures or writing down, the events in your life, before you go into anything that is high stakes, because that's the only thing we can control, how we show up, right? And for someone who's been 99% like voice in my head, a nitpicky voice in my head, like that's been a really helpful practice.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thank you, Gail. Ivna, we're going to chat to you now about assertive communication. I know that this is definitely an area that you specialize in, and what does it mean, being assertive mean, and what are some practical tips to speak up effectively to build trust and respect?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So assertiveness gets a really bad reputation, and really the word doesn't matter. What matters is that we speak up as women, that we make the ask, that we express ourselves and do so in a way that does not trigger a negative response from people, because there's an assumption that we have to be nurturing and kind all the time, never ask, never talk about ourselves, never self-promote, and never push too hard. And we need to be able to do that to get the funding. We need to be able to do that to move forward, to get people on our side, get the resources, our fair share of those resources for our ideas. And that's why it's so important to be able to do this and really study and understand how to do this the most effective way, that does not disrupt how we're perceived. That does not make us sound aggressive or difficult or abrasive, which are some of the common words that as women we're associated with when we try to assert our ideas, our needs, the resources that we want for ourselves, for our teams, for our ideas. So a couple of things to keep in mind are, with assertiveness, it really is, there's 5 elements to it just to keep in mind. Number one, it's a skill that you can absolutely learn. And it's easy, right? Number 2, it's about communication. So it's the skill of speaking up. It's the skill of asking for what you want. It's the skill of expressing yourself. It's the skill of handling bias when it happens, of setting those boundaries. That's what it is. And so that's the second element. It's the skill of speaking up. which is a communication skill. Third, it's absolutely respectful. It's respectful to others. So because we know we want others to feel respected, otherwise they won't pay attention to what we have to say. But also it's respectful to ourselves because we honor our voice, we honor who we are, we honor what we have to share with this world and to contribute. And fourth, it is influential. And the reason why influence is so key is because it's not just about venting off our frustrations. It's really about achieving change in people's behavior, getting them to do something, getting them to understand our perspective, getting their buy-in, getting the funding. It's about influence. So that's why it's so important to think these things through and even script some of these conversations ahead so you know what are the key points you want to touch on. And fifth is calm. And I'm sure most of you are able to remain calm even in a situation of frustration so that you can be present in the moment, really listen carefully to the other person, their nonverbals, and be able to respond accordingly. And there are a couple ways of doing this, many different techniques. I want to share one specific one with a story that one of my personal stories, which is I was in a situation where I had at work, had a corporate job beforehand. And this is a time when I felt the most disrespected because one of my senior colleagues who I internally serviced with my team blasted an email out to a bunch of people saying that I was and my team were useless, not doing our job. And that email included most of my senior stakeholders, including my manager, my manager's manager. And I had to respond to that assertively in order to be able to change his behavior because he was more senior than me. And so here's what you can do in any situation. This applies to any difficult conversation you want to have, but also in general, right? Disagreements, asks, feedback, any of those things, parts of this framework will apply, which are number one, you connect with the individual. This is where we're trying to maintain the relationship. So, hey, thank you so much for making the time to speak to me. I appreciate you, right? Or appreciate our relationship. That's the connection. Then you move on to describing the situation and how you feel and using a lot of I language. And this is where the respect comes in because people don't feel attacked. I don't say, you made me feel disrespected. You hurt my team's credibility. I say, here's this. I went down to his office and I print out a paper, the email, and I showed it to him. I said, hey, here's what I saw. Facts, right? I know you women in tech are good at facts. Bring in the facts. Right, here's a situation where I felt disrespected. Not you were disrespectful, because that's more of an attack, blaming. Even if it's true, I felt disrespected. Then you clarify any assumptions from your end with them by being curious, by asking questions. Hey, what's going on here? What's the reason? I didn't even know what the problem was with this guy. So I asked for clarification. Hey, could you help me understand what's happening? What's wrong? What's the reason for this email? Get their perspective. They're going to feel heard. Then you come in to express your side of the equation, your perspective with an I statement again. Well, the impact of this email on me and my team was that it hurt our credibility, it caused these issues, and I wasn't even aware of this problem. And we can fix that. I told him we can fix that within 24 hours. Now comes the most important part of this communication, which is asserting your request. This is what Gail was talking about. We have to make the ask. We have to ask. Always, there's something, no matter what you say, there's something that you're asking the other person to think differently, do differently, act differently. And this is where, in this situation, I said, listen, this is what we need to do. I would, from now onwards, I request of you, if you have any issues, come talk to me, right? It's important for you to talk to me. I'm here. Here's my phone number. Call me anytime, text me anytime. I'm here to serve you. However, please do talk to me. Otherwise, because this way we can have a good relationship together and make things smooth. And then finally confirm the agreement, confirm the other person's understanding. Are you okay with that? Can you do that going forward? Yes. Great. Reaffirm the relationship. That's the last part. Great. Thank you so much for your understanding. I appreciate our time together. I look forward to a better working relationship with you going forward. That's it. done, close in positive note. Don't make them feel, it doesn't make them feel hurt or attacked in any way, but you get your ask in and you get them to confirm. And that's the most important thing. So I wanted to share that little example with you guys, and you can apply this in many different ways.
Thank you so much, Ivna. And I think that, yeah, this morning at Uncommon, we did a breakfast on confidence, and we were saying actually that communication is the, like, how you operationalize your confidence. And I think that it really hits the nail on the head, that you having that confidence to have those difficult conversations and speak up. Thank you so much for taking us through that example. And I was taking notes. Thanks. I'll would love to now jump to self-awareness and leadership. So, this is an evergreen topic, I think, for all leaders, and one that we're kind of continually uncovering. Maybe I'll take this one to you, Michele. I know you to be someone very self-aware, so this one, I would love to know, how do you actively cultivate self-awareness, and as a follow-up, in what ways does that contribute to your effectiveness as a leader?
Okay, so I think one thing that I do to keep myself aware of what's going on or how I'm impacting other people is to ask for feedback and observe. I think one of the things that I have picked up, as a coach, is really to start observing how other people respond to what I might be saying or what I might have done. So it's this whole bit around feedback, right? For me to ask for feedback if I'm not sure about something, or if I'm sensing that something I've said or something I've done has landed in a different way, maybe. If I just noticed something, an expression, sometimes even a body sensation, then I would just seek, I'll seek clarification. I'll just say, oh, I'm noticing, I noticed, you had a frown, and I'm just wondering what that was. Or if someone teared up, I might even ask, what are those tears about? So that bit about offering my observations and feedback, but also asking for it. So asking people, if there's any way, how, what am I doing well? Are there areas that I could improve on? And, of course, the third one is, is there anything that I absolutely should stop doing, especially if it's in a partnership and a working relationship. Asking for feedback is important. And I think one of the things for me is to listen to what they have to say, because I do know myself in the past, I tend to be quite defensive. So a lot of times when I ask for feedback, or especially family members, when mom and dad has something to say, when a partner has something to say, a good friend has something to say, I've learned to just hold that space, keep quiet, and let it sink in. And then after that, I either have a conversation with myself in terms of, okay, is that something I want to take on board and proactively do something about it? Or is that something I'll park aside? And of course, I do have mentors whom I speak to as well. So bouncing off some of the feedback I've received, sometimes to validate, because my mentors know me quite well. They might validate that, yeah, we noticed this, or if it is not, then maybe it's something to just put in the back burner. So that's just myself, keeping myself,
I love that. I feel like it's this, like, you kind of use your own self-awareness to also then be aware of everyone else's emotions. And what I loved hearing as well was this idea of responding, overreacting, and that you kind of take that time to digest and then communicate communicate effectively. I love that. I'm going to move to our last question. This one's for Gail because we've got some questions piling up. It's about likability and competence, and it's something that we hear a lot about. And I welcome our other speakers if this is something you want to say on this as well. But for Gail, how does anyone navigate that fine line between being perceived as likable and demonstrating competence, especially in situations where gender stereotypes may influence certain perceptions or certain expectations of how one should behave.
Funny you asked a people pleaser. The
I know.
likability question. I really believe knowing how you're wired is critical because to the last question, I have a very different answer than Michele, right? But that's because I've spent my whole life being hyper vigilant, hyper aware of what everyone expects of me to be liked. And I'm learning the balance is really going inwards. So we need to know where we stand. And I came across the MBTI test, which has kind of had it's been refreshed. And so there's a fifth dimension to it that tells you if you're a turbulent personality or an assertive personality. And the turbulent ones tend to be most vulnerable to what people think of them, and hence like you might be more geared to wanting to be liked. More so than you need to be. Right? That I found that a good diagnostic or reflection point. And so there's a lot said about women who put their head down and get shit done, and they're extremely qualified and competent, but nobody knows about it, or not enough people know about it. So there's the branding and the marketing piece so that one can be perceived as a leader. Because to be a leader, I think you need to be trusted, and you also need to know enough about situation, but also be humble that there are things you don't know. My approach has been people don't care how much you know until you know how much you care. And so it is an effective leader really has to read the room or read your audience to understand what is the thing that will make them feel safe. And that's the foundation to building trust. I don't know if being liked is actually helps any of that. So, right, but competence goes some way.
Yeah, I love that. No, it is such a fine line, and I love what you said about needing to build that safety. I would love actually, Ivna, to hear your take on this question. So navigating the fine line between being liked and demonstrating competence, and how do you sort of see this tie in with assertive communication?
Yeah, no, it's 100% there. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm just like Gail, I am also a huge people pleaser. I'm very agreeable, and I've always been described my entire life as nice. And then I wanted to change that adjective. I want to be respected by people, not just be seen as the nice woman, the nice girl, usually the nice girl, the nice person. And one of the things that I realized, also having had a career in a male-dominated field, in observing and interviewing, hundreds of people as well, and women in male-dominated fields and in tech, a couple of things that I've noticed is that a lot of the way that people perceive us, our competence, is not based on actually what we do and how much work we get done, how amazing our work is. There's a lot of that, but I'm sure you've been in a situation where you've seen people who you wonder how they get ahead and how they get so many resources when their ideas and their work is not that great. And that's because what I call the conviction element, because they have the 3Ds. I'm going to talk about my 3Ds. I like to bring you Yolanda said, let's bring practical things. So that's what I want to bring to you guys. So be direct. When there's something, yes, be kind, establish the connection, but when the time comes, be direct about that ask. Be direct about what you actually mean and want to say. And do that with conviction. That ask is so important. The second D is being definitive in your statements. Not every day when I'm connecting with people, I'm not definitive. But if I want someone to really listen to what I have to say, I realize that I have to be definitive, because otherwise people yawn, go to bed, sleep, move, look at their cell phones, they get distracted. And the third is to be decisive. When you make a decision, communicate that decisively so that people take you seriously. And then to counter that with the likability part, that's where you come in with the connection. And it can't be connection as a sorry or minimizing yourself or being tentative or doing up talk and tags and all those things, introductions of your statement, or using, oh, I'm just this is a small little idea. No, you avoid all of that, and instead you connect in three ways. You encourage people to express themselves, you ask for their thoughts, their perspectives, their feedback. Like Michele said, you're asking for them to speak up and share their thoughts. Then you engage with them, and what they share, you validate them, you empathize with them, you appreciate what they shared, you comment on it, just like Yolanda's been doing with all throughout. And then finally, you self-express, you express your thoughts and your expectations and your wants and your needs and your desires and your intentions, because nobody can read our minds. And when you do those two things, you're able to really balance that likability with that competence, that perception of yes, I believe in you. I know what you're saying. I'm going to listen to you, and I'll give you, I'll follow along with what you're saying. So that's my take, so that you can be respected, and that's the most important thing.
Yeah. Love that. Thank you so much, Ivna, for sharing that. I'll just say one maybe follow-up point from that, and would love if any kind of popcorn round, if anyone wants to comment on it. Like, one thing I definitely think I've experienced as a female leader is, like, talking about those tips you have, like, that you can be penalized for that directness a lot more than a male counterpart. That there's an expectation that you are a little bit like a mother on the team, or that you are meant to be nurturing. And when it comes to having a really hard conversation, that expectation doesn't match where you're supposed to be as a woman. And I don't know if anyone has experienced that, or even if you have anything to follow up on that. But that's something I've seen a lot of women at Uncommon deal with as well. Yeah.
That's huge. That's a huge issue for us women. And that's why it's so important for us to understand the tools that we have available for us. I highly recommend and she's delivered what I'm talking about with the connection. That's playing nurturing. Appreciate you. I like what you're doing. Thank you. I hear you. I validate you. That's the connection part that doesn't minimize our competency. And then at the same time, when it matters, we bring in that more direct statement. And by mixing the playing high, playing low within the same conversation, and depending on who's in the room and what your read is, you're able to balance those two things at the same time. So I highly recommend checking her out.
Will do. Thank you. And thank you, Ivna. Thank you, Michele. Thank you, Gail, for, we really covered such a range of topics, from fundraising to assertive communication to likability and competence. I know that I'm definitely walking away with a lot of, nuggets and wisdom on the ability to kind of choose the environments that you're in, being direct with your communication, really working on your self-worth, and also not attaching it to these external kind of milestones like fundraising. So yeah, really, really grateful for all of you carving out this slice of your morning for Ivna, middle of the night for Ivna, and evening for Michele and Gail. I would love now for us to turn over to some of the questions that are in the chat. I believe that people have put them in the chat, and I may have forgotten to announce it, so apologies for that. But yes, if you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat or even DM them to June. But we're happy to take them. So June, I believe June will be reading them out. Thanks.
Yeah. Hey guys. Okay. So a few people DM'd me directly to ask their questions. So I have a couple of them here. The first one is, what is the best leadership advice you have ever received? Gail, you want to go?
Well, I live by quotes, so I'll share another one from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And at the risk of sounding so super touchy-feely, I think that is a combination of the elements Ivna talked about, connecting and also effectively communicating. And it's taken a long time to learn the second piece for me, right? To make a request powerfully without giving your power away or asserting too much power over others. But that's kind of what people remember, like in their bodies 10 years later.
Nice. Anybody else?
I remember something that my CEO, everyone has his or her problems. So focus on yours and just do your job. Really, take care of myself, know what my role is, and give my best to the role that I've been given, and stay focused on that path. And yeah, so I use that till today, because when I think about it, sometimes there could be temptations to try and compare myself with someone else and all. Tell myself, I will remind myself, okay, what's my calling? Who am I called to reach out to? Stay focused on that. Be the best that I can be. Keep learning and growing, and keep serving in that area that I've been called to. Everything else, everyone's got their own moving parts. Everybody will need to do their parts. But for me, my job, my mandate is to focus on myself, upskilling myself, do my job, and keep staying focused on where I'm headed.
Very quick one. For me, it was it really left an impression in me when I was doing these regular meetings it was only 15 minutes, a couple of days a week, with the senior leaders in the company, just providing a revenue update essentially for the day, because I was in analytics as well. And after I've done some of those, one of the leaders that was in the audience regularly came to me separately and said, Ivna, I see that what you're doing and the content is great of your presentations every day. However, I really want to hear your opinion. I want to hear your opinion, and I want you to speak with conviction. That's why I talked about conviction. And I want you to speak with conviction. I really don't care that much if you're right or wrong. I really want to hear that conviction from you. And that really, it changed my life, because I was thinking, there I was trying to just be impartial all the time, be neutral. And he wanted me to have an opinion and speak with conviction, even if it was wrong. About the perfection. And so it really changed my perspective on things. And I went on to hear that feedback with many women and men as well, getting the same feedback from senior leaders. So it was an aha moment and very different from everything I had learned previously about being a good student, doing perfect work, doing everything right.
Thanks. I can, I guess, give a quick one. I think mine actually came from a coach, but it's still also as a recovering people pleaser. It's one I work a lot on. But this idea, I always thought that like compassionate leadership was just like was people pleasing. It's just I thought it was just being nice and just yeah, you want that and yes, yes, yes. And then really realizing actually that compassionate leadership is having those hard conversations. It's being honest. It's sometimes firing someone. It's all of these things can be out of, and I think it's the how you do it, and that was what I got. It's how you do it, and less about keeping some situation ongoing because you want to be that people pleaser, and I think that that's something I struggle with, to be honest, to always have like those direct, honest conversations that aren't going to make people happy, but it's such an important point, is and such an important part of being a leader as well.